Long before anyone stood on its summit, this mountain was already a graveyard. Avalanches buried whole expeditions, storms pinned climbers until they froze. Families waited for men who never returned. It isn't the tallest, that's Everest. It isn't the hardest, that's K2. But no peak has taken more lives so mercilessly. This is Nanga Parbat, the killer mountain, rising 26,660 feet above northern Pakistan. It is the 9th highest mountain in the world. But what makes it truly intimidating is not the number, it's the shape. On its southern side, the mountain drops almost straight down into the valley below. This wall of rock and ice, called the Rupal Face, is over 15,000 feet tall, the largest mountain face on Earth. The mountain stands alone, separated from the rest of the Himalaya, unlike Everest or Annapurna. Surrounded by neighboring giants, Nanga Parbat rises as a solitary peak above the Indus River. Getting there isn't easy. Roads into the Dimar and Rupal valleys are rough and often cut by landslides. Small villages dot the lower slopes, but above them, the land quickly empties into glaciers and sheer cliffs. At 26,660 feet, Nanga Parbat pushes deep into the death zone, the altitude above 26,000, where the body can no longer adapt. The air carries only a third of the oxygen found at sea level. Climbers move slowly. Strength fades quickly, and clear thinking becomes difficult. With few fixed ropes or camps, climbers must carve their own routes while carrying heavy loads. Every hour at altitude burns energy they can't replace, and storms often force them to wait in exposed camps while their bodies weaken. In 1934, a team led by Willy Merkel pushed high on the Rupal Face, the north side of the mountain. A sudden storm pinned them down above 24,000 feet. Food and fuel ran out while the blizzard raged. Avalanches ripped through their camps, and the cold was more than they could endure. When the storm finally cleared, 10 climbers and 9 porters were dead. A handful of survivors stumbled down the mountain, frostbitten and half-blind. For the climbers trapped in 1934, the ordeal was slow and brutal. Letters and diaries later recovered described dwindling rations, snow piling against tents, and men coughing blood in the thin air. They waited for a break in the storm that never came. The Sherpa porters were buried alongside the German climbers, far from their homes in Nepal. When news reached Europe, the disaster shocked the climbing world. Yet instead of ending the obsession, it only fueled more attempts. 3 years later, tragedy struck again. In 1937, an avalanche swept through another German camp, killing 16 men in seconds. Nothing could be done to save them. By the end of the decade, Nanga Parbat had become infamous. More climbers had died here than on almost any other mountain in the world, even though the summit was still untouched. It was during these years that the mountain's lasting name took hold, the Killer Mountain. By the early 1950s, the summit of Nanga Parbat was still untouched. The mountain had already claimed more than 30 lives, and many doubted it could ever be climbed. In 1953, an Austrian-German expedition set out under Karl Herrlichkoffer. Among the climbers was a young Austrian, Hermann Buhl. After weeks of moving supplies up the Rupal Face, the team made their final push. Most turned back, exhausted. Only Buhl kept going. Climbing alone and without bottled oxygen, he forced his way up through the night. After more than 17 hours on the move, he reached the summit, the first person to stand on top of Nanga Parbat. But the hardest part was still ahead. Darkness fell as he descended, leaving him stranded above 26,000 feet, with no tent, no food, and no partner. He had no choice but to stand upright on a tiny ledge, leaning against his ice axe to keep from falling. By morning, he was frostbitten and exhausted, but alive. After nearly 40 hours on the move, he staggered back to camp, barely able to stand. Buhl's ascent is still considered one of the greatest feats in mountaineering history. It was a triumph against impossible odds. On the southern side of Nanga Parbat rises the Rupal Face, a vast wall of rock and ice that drops more than 15,000 feet into the valley. For decades, climbers had looked at it and called it impossible. In 1970, a German expedition set out to prove otherwise. Among the team were two brothers from South Tyrol, Reinhold and Günther Messner. Reinhold was known for his bold approach, climbing fast and light, without the heavy gear others relied on. The team advanced up the face, and Reinhold pushed ahead, with Günther following. Against all odds, they reached the summit. It was the first successful climb of the Rupal Face, a feat many thought could never be done. But the mountain took its toll on the way down. Exhausted, the brothers descended the opposite side, the Dimer Face. There, Günther was caught in an avalanche and never returned. Reinhold, frostbitten and half delirious, somehow survived. He stumbled barefoot across glaciers and through crevasses until he finally reached the valleys below. The climb changed mountaineering history. Reinhold went on to become one of the greatest climbers of all time. But Nanga Parbat remained the mountain that cost him his brother. Today, only a handful of expeditions attempt Nanga Parbat each year. Compared to Everest, where hundreds of climbers line the route every season, the killer mountain remains quiet and almost empty. The routes are still raw, few fixed ropes are in place, and support is limited. Climbers often choose alpine style, moving fast with minimal gear, but that leaves no margin for error. A single mistake or sudden storm can end an expedition. Even with modern equipment, satellite forecasts, and lighter gear, Nanga Parbat continues to turn teams back. Success is rare, and the mountain keeps its reputation as one of the least climbed of the 8,000-meter giants. What makes Nanga Parbat so feared is not one single danger, but the fact that every danger in mountaineering seems concentrated here. Storms compound the risk, weather shifts in minutes, turning a climb into a whiteout. Tents are buried, routes vanish, and retreat becomes almost impossible. Climbers trapped at altitude burn through food and fuel while their strength fades. The terrain itself is unforgiving. The Rupal Face demands endurance on a scale found nowhere else. On the Dimer side, glaciers break into crevasses and ice falls that block escape. Isolation makes every accident worse. Unlike Everest, there are no long lines of climbers or heavy logistical support. Teams on Nanga Parbat face the peak almost entirely on their own, with rescue often days away, if it's possible at all. And finally, there is the history. From the German tragedies of the 1930s to the Messner expedition in 1970, Nanga Parbat has written itself into mountaineering history as a place where ambition collides with death. This combination is what makes the killer mountain unique. Nowhere else in the Himalaya do avalanches, storms, altitude, and isolation converge with such force, and with so little room for mistakes. For decades, Nanga Parbat's fatality rate was among the highest of any 8,000-meter peak. At times, nearly one climber was lost for every two who reached the summit. This is what makes Nanga Parbat different from Everest, or even K2. Success is rare, survival is uncertain, and its history is written as much in tragedy as in triumph. Nanga Parbat is more than a mountain. It is a test of human limits. Every climber who sets foot on its slopes knows the risks, and every story from its past is a reminder of the price. Some see a chance for glory, others see only a graveyard. Tell me in the comments, would you dare to face the killer mountain? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of deadly climbs and unforgiving places.